Well, welcome to Old Classic Cars. In this collection we're looking at cars in the 1970s, and to begin with, street scene with a variety of classic cars of that decade on view. In the foreground a Mark III Mini, slightly rusty Mini it has to be said, and on the right one of those Chrysler Alpines, the ones with the really rattly engines, and there's a Hillman Hunter or a Minx there, and a nice period 1970s caravan as well. There's that a Datsun 120Y and just sneaking in. Okay, next shot, thanks to Steve for this one. And we have an M registered Morris Marina saloon, complete with full-length sunroof, parked alongside G-BCYF, which is a Falcon 20, still around by all accounts as well. I think this was photographed at Heathrow. Next up, a head-on view of YMG 333H. That is a Humber Scepter, the upmarket version, if you like, of the Hillman Minx and the Hillman Hunter. And changing up a gear in the Glamour Stakes, we're outside Bristol Cars Limited and 100 mph. That is a Bristol 412, and apparently this was their original demonstrator car, circa 1976. A wonderful beach location here, a variety of classic 1970s cars in view there. We've got all sorts there, Mark I Escort Estate, a Wolseley 1885, Peugeot 504 Estate, what else can you see there, a Sunbeam Rapier, an early Alfa Romeo Alfa Sud, Renault 16, all sorts of cars there. Now two photographs of RLR 1R. This is a Vauxhall Cavalier Mark I saloon in green metallic with the proud owner stood alongside. This registration is actually still around. It's now worn on a 2021 Nissan of all things, but back in the 1970s it graced the front and rear of this Vauxhall Cavalier. A press photograph now, and this is the lesser spotted Lancia Beta Berlina. These were built from 1972 to 1981. Most of the cars in this particular collection were actually built in the 1970s, one or two are slightly earlier, but as this is cars in the 1970s, we'll be a little bit flexible on that one. Okay, head-on view now of EGL 816V. Note the typeface on the registration plates used at the time. The car is a Ford Fiesta Mark I. Project Bobcat was the name when these cars were being developed in the mid-1970s. And what do we have here? We have an F registered, so just before the 1970s, Reliant Scimitar GT SE4. These were built from 64 through to 1970, originally with the inline Ford's 6-cylinder engine and later with the V6 Essex engine. And staying with Ford for a moment, we've got a magnificent Ford Zodiac Mark IV in limousine guise. Thanks to Jim, he sent over this photograph and several others several years ago now. What a great old car that is. No sign of it now on the DVLA database, so presumably it was scrapped a long time ago. Okay, and thanks to Neil for this one, and a front-on view of their brand new Renault 4. That's Neil's son in the photograph, WHG. That is a Burnley registration series, first introduced in September 1973. This is on an M plate, so late 73 or early 1974. Now, I'm not quite sure where this is. I'm guessing Cotswolds perhaps, looking at the stone used in the buildings. We've got a variety of 70s cars there, Mark I Golf, the good old Austin Allegro, MGB, one of the Datsuns a bit further ahead, and a Peugeot Estate, a bit of everything there, a real cosmopolitan mix of cars. Okay, and a side-on view of the Reliant Scimitar GTE. We had the GT SE4 before, and now we have the SE5 or the SE5A variant, very 1970s, again with the 3-litre Ford V6 engine under the bonnet, all fiberglass body of course on these cars. And back to steel-bodied cars, rear engine in this case, and the good old VW Beetle, thanks to Cyril for this photo. The car is a 1303S on an L plate, so it'll be late 1972 or early 1973, that particular car. Looks in great condition there. Next up, an old slide that I found somewhere. We've got a Dublin registered Opel Kadett, one of the B series Opel Kadetts. These were introduced in 1965 and built all the way through to 1973. And this particular photo dates sometime to the mid-1970s, I believe. Oh, holidaying time, and the car is a Wolseley 1885 HPL 958K. That car was put on the road in December 71. It still shows as registered, amazingly. It hasn't been taxed since 1986, so the chances are it's probably scrapped and DVLA not notified. The caravan is a CR Europa. Okay, we're over in Australia now. This car probably dates to about 1969, but was photographed a little later. It's a Holden HB Tirana. And we've got a VW Beetle on the right, sporting a very natty paint job. And a couple of other classics there as well. Can you identify those for me as well? I'm assuming they're also of Australian build like the Holden. Okay, thanks to Keith for this photo, and it's his Series 1 Jaguar XJ6 XOV 222J. Very, very smart indeed. That's a 4.2 litre car, and even rarer perhaps is that Honda Civic parked just off to the right there. You hardly ever see those nowadays. Carrying on the 1970s, and we've got probably a late 60s example of the Seat 600. This photograph was taken in Spain, and the Seat 600s of course were based there under licence from Fiat. But yeah, very, very chilly time of year, judging by all that snow on the roof. And what do we have here? Thanks to Sam for this photo and several others that appear in this collection of 1970s car photographs. We are probably late 60s, early 1970s with this particular photograph. I'm not quite sure of the location, but we've got a real cosmopolitan mixture of cars there somewhere in Europe. What a great selection of Fiat 500 in the foreground. There's a better look at this Hillman Minx. This was one of the Arrow series cars. The F-plate probably puts this one about 1968, and it was photographed just a few years after that particular date. Another holidaying scene here. We have a Mini, an L-Reg Mini, a Mark III Mini, so the first of the Minis to have the hidden door hinges and the wind-up windows, and you can just see next to that lovely old caravan a Triumph Estate, either a 2000 or a 2500 Estate. It could either be a Mark I or a Mark II, because they both shared the same back-end bodywork. Okay, now to a J-plate, about 1970, two-door Ford Escort Mark I. And just in the background there, you can see a Cortina Mark IV. So very much a 1970s scene we've got going on here. The Escort is looking a little bit tired. Ooh, a bit of glamour now. Maserati Quattroporte. This photo I think dates to about 1969 or 1970, so just about qualifies. 4.1 litre V8 engine hiding under that bonnet, just under 300 brake horsepower produced. So that's a very swish and elegant way to transport several people around the continent. Slightly more humble now, we have a great old photo here of an Austin Maxi towing a vintage caravan circa 1970 or thereabouts. Does anyone recognise the location? We've got some very distinctive looking ruins on the top of the hill at the back there. At first I thought Whitby when I saw this, but it doesn't look like the right shaped building at all. Oh, a bit of race action here, and we have a DAF 55. These were introduced in 67 and produced right through to 72. There's a CVT transmission, roughly 1100cc or thereabouts engine in the back. We've got several other 1970s cars in the background there as well. A Dolly, Escort and a Triumph 2000. Another great old photo here from Keith, and that is his Morris 1300 GT EAB 212J circa 1970 or 71. A couple of minis in shot as well, and also a white Triumph Toledo. Melvin provided these two photographs of his old Vauxhall Viva EFH 331T circa 1978. Several cars in the background, and photo one there, you've got a Peugeot. Is that a 504 on the right hand side there? Great stuff. Next up, we are over in America, and this is a Pontiac Firebird, one of the first generation Firebirds. This car and photo, I think it's about 1969 or 1970, but it's such a great photo, I thought, well, I'll include it here. And you can just about see an SO garage in the background as well. HO on the front wing there, or front fender, I think is for high output. Oh, here we go. One of the facelifted Morris Marinas here. And this photograph is dated January 1979, and clearly a winter scene. Well, looks very chilly, plenty of snow on the back window of that Marina. I'll have to get that heated rear window switched on, assuming it actually had a heated rear window, that is. I'm not quite sure. I've got a photo here now of a Datsun 120A Cherry Coupe. These were brought in 1970 and continued in production until about 77, I think. Not one of the best looking cars, if I'm honest. I never really liked these, even when they were around as I was growing up in the 1970s. I remember this sort of thing, and it didn't really do much for me. Now, here we go. Thanks to Steve for this one. That's his dad, Peter Burden, photographed with a Series 3 Jaguar E-Type V12. That car was a works demonstrator by all accounts. That was quite a special car. I wonder if it's still around. Got an FB Victor Estate in front of that, and a Cresta in front of that. It's a real gaggle of classic cars there. Look at this, a P-registered Renault 5. It looks like someone maybe has just got married. All sorts of decorations on that particular car. Yes, Penny and Pete, it says on the rear wing then. A bit of rust just appearing on the back arch as well. Classic Renault 5 rock problems. And there's a very young me on a cycling proficiency course many years ago. And there was a real gaggle of 1970s cars there. We've got a Ford Capri 2, a Dolomite, a Mark II's got the Saab 95 Estate, the V4 Estate, an Audi. So I'm guessing this is about 80 or 81 actually, this photo. Another one of Steve's great shots here from Heathrow. This was taken in Heathrow in about 1975, I believe. And we've got a Morris Marina pickup. What a rare vehicle that is. Had a bit of a nerf on the front corner by the looks of it. Quite a gaggle of extra lights. Those are called Lucas Square 8s, those lights that are bolted onto the front bumper there. Back to Fords, and we've got TUJ 188S, a Mark IV Ford Cortina gear. Thanks very much to Keith again for that photo. Really appreciate all the photos that people have sent in and the ones that have appeared in this 1970s collection. It's always great to hear from you with your old photographs. Here's a bit of an odd one. I had to zoom in and I could just make out the V6 badge on the rear corner there, telling us that this is the Renault 30, the V6 powered Renault 30, the upmarket version, larger engine version of the Renault 20. Nice alloy wheels as well. Okay, carrying on. We are in New Zealand, thanks to Peter for this one. We have a Fiat 131, a Series 1 car. These were introduced in 74 and built through to 1978. This photo was taken in 1975. I like the chrome bumpers on these early cars. Two for the price of one. Both Ford Cortina Mark IIIs, and very similar in specification, even down to extra badges on the grills and some extra driving lamps as well. What a great pair. I wonder if either of those are still around anymore. Both on an end plate, so about 1974. Side-on view now of the Citroen GS, a car that was introduced by Citroen in 1970 and continued in production for about 9 years, and it was replaced by the updated GSA, but this is the earlier GS. The GSA was a full hatchback if I remember right, as the GS just had a small opening boot lid beneath the rear window. Ooh, a bit of glamour here, the Jensen Interceptor converter, an old press photograph here of a left-hand drive Jensen Interceptor. How grand does that look? Not for publication before March 22nd, 1974 it says, so I think we'll be okay on that score. Back to little Fiats again. Here we have a Fiat 600. I think this photo dates to about 1969 or 1970. The car is probably 2 or 3 years earlier than that, but the photo just about creeps in within the right date range for this particular compilation of old photographs. Large selection of quality used cars, it says, and outside this particular emporium we have a somewhat battered Mark I Vauxhall Cavalier. It's looking a bit sorry for itself. Maybe it was in for a bit of repair work, or maybe someone just saw the irony and grabbed a quick photograph, who knows. There's a Mark II Escort just poking out as well. Now we're down at Brands Hatch and we have a Talbot Sunbeam TI. These were introduced around about 1976 if I remember right. Next up in this collection of 1970s car photos, we've got one of Keith's again, a head-on view of an N-registered Daimler 66 VDP, the Van den Plas, the top of the line of the Series 2. What a great car that is, with the Jaguar V12 engine under the bonnet, 5.3 litres, initially on carburetors and later fuel injected. Very nice indeed. Now there's all sorts going on here. We've got a Renault 6 on the right hand side. These were introduced in '68 and produced right through the '70s and well into the 1980s. But we've got a whole gaggle of 1970s cars in the background there, as well as a '64 VW Beetle. Bit of classic long wheelbase Land Rover goodness here. Very, very nice indeed. Benny Carlo, as it says on the door. But this one has been taken in Spain, this particular photograph, and it's a left-hand drive example, as you'd expect. I wonder if that one's still around. Very chunky tyres on this particular example. As befits driving on the beach, I guess. Oh, the good old Austin Allegro. We've got a four-door Austin Allegro saloon here on an R plate. So about 1976 is the registration of that particular car. Thanks to Barry for that snapshot. Still plenty of 1970s car photos to come. I do like that Allegro. Oh, we've got another long wheelbase Land Rover here. And is this in use with the police force somewhere perhaps? Could this be from the same fleet as that Spanish example we saw just a moment ago? If you know, let me know in the comments. Unusual hubcaps on this one. And again, it's got those very chunky sort of town and country style tyres almost. So perhaps this one also was used on the beach. Another of Steve's great old photographs here. We've got a Daimler Series 1 in the foreground, complete with full-length sunroof. Very, very swish indeed. Nice period caravan on the background there, and in the distant driveway, another example of the Lancia Beta Berlina, the saloon version of the Beta. Another old press photograph now. It looks a bit like an Audi, but actually the notes on the rear tell us that this is an Auto Union 1700 with an engine designed by Mercedes-Benz. That's interesting. I wonder how many of those sold here in this country. There can't have been many, and I shouldn't think there are too many of them around now either. A very rare sight now, but quite a clean looking car. And totally different is this. This is the Lotus 7 Series 4. The young lady about to climb aboard. These were introduced in 1970 and built until '73. You had two options, 1298cc or 1599cc, both Ford Kent engines. But yeah, very swish indeed. Now here's a nice one. I think this was again in New Zealand, as some of these Fiat photographs have been. It's a Fiat 125, I believe. Look at the registration. I wonder if that gives us a bit of a clue. 1608cc twin cam engines were fitted to these. Came out in '67 and were produced until 1972. Thanks to Alan, he sent this one over quite a while ago now, and I've found somewhere to include it in this 1970s collection. We got a J plate, two-door Vauxhall Viva HC. Looks like we've got some unusual wheels, or perhaps wheel trims. I do like those natty fog lamps with those checkerboard covers on as well. That's really cool. Very 1970s in look. Back to New Zealand, and here I think we have the Holden. Now I think this is the HX Premier. The HZ also look fairly similar, so I'm sure someone will correct me or confirm that that's what we're looking at here. But yeah, it's a Holden and it's in New Zealand. I know that much anyway. Oh, a great photo here again from Sam. What a fantastic rainy day photograph of a street in Luxembourg. There's a Citroen Amy driving towards us on the left, but most of the other cars I can't really identify. So if you want to have a stab at that car in front of us, and indeed the Finn car on the right, please pop a note into the comments. And what do we have here? This is the Holden VB Commodore. Again, this was photographed in New Zealand, so thanks Peter. These were introduced in 1978. Quite a swish looking car, very similar to the Opel Record that we had in this country. But yeah, this is the Australian and New Zealand market Holden VB Commodore. Okay, to Sweden now, and we have a fairly early example of the Volvo 144 Saloon, a left-hand drive example here. Clearly it's some sort of motor show, some type or other, but no notes sadly accompanying this photograph, so we won't know for sure. A bit of race competition action here, and a bubble-arched, much modified Mark I Ford Escort. This was in the early 1970s. I'm not quite sure where, perhaps still at Brands Hatch. If you recognise the location, please pop a note in the comments. I'd always like to update the photographs with your notes as and when they come in. Okay, now thanks to Phil for these two photographs. What a great shot that is. He bought this Sunbeam Rapier H120 in 1972, ran it for a couple of years here, and then he emigrated over to New Zealand and took the car with him. This photograph was at Southampton Docks. What a great shot that is. Long before the days of roll-on, roll-off ferries, and there it is in the hold with a Mercedes to the left and a little 1100, or one of the derivatives of the 1100 on the right there. What a great photo. And that car is still around, the Sunbeam. It was even spotted by Phil's daughter not so long ago, and she managed to grab a few photographs of it at, yeah, just down the road I think it was. Okay, Next up we have a Ford Taunus or Taunus. This is one of the P6 series cars, and these were built from 66 to 1970, and about 1970 is roughly the date of this photograph, and there's another example part behind as well. Okay, a quiet roadside scene here, and we have a Soul car there, a TFC 691T, a Triumph Dolomite with a sizable roof rack on it. I wonder where this photograph was taken. Several bungalows in evidence. I wonder if much has changed in that particular scene. Probably not, to be honest. Oh, who remembers these? This is the Citroen Ami. This is the Ami 6, the estate or the brake version of the Citroen Ami. I do like these a lot. Do you remember at one of the Crew Heritage videos I had a lengthy chat with the owner of a very original one of these? What a great looking little car that is. Really eccentric French design. A little bit of glamour now. And we have a very bonny little Fiat 500 here. And according to the notes on the back of this old photo, it was nicknamed Rosebud by the young lady in the photo there. Back to Brands or wherever it may have been, and we have a race prepared Ford Anglia 105 here. If anyone knows the story of that car and the drivers' names on the front wing, please let me know. Got a few cars from the 1960s in the background as well, but I think this photograph dates to probably 70, 72, somewhere around about there. Another one of Sam's excellent photos, somewhere in Italy I believe this was, again early in the decade. We've got a real variety of mainly late 60s cars in evidence there. What a great colour photograph. I do love the colour photographs when these turn up. They just really add so much to it. Back to black and white for a moment. Thanks to Steve again for this one. And this was their yellow Austin Allegro estate on an S registration. So the S series ran from late 77 through to July of 1978. Yeah, so we've already seen the Allegro saloon a couple of times, and here is the quite striking estate version. Another one of Keith's great old colour photos here. We have a J-plate Ford Capri Mark I with a Cortina Mark III in the background, and that's a Mark II Cortina in that distant driveway. Does anyone recognise the boat that's parked, or moored rather, alongside the Cortina? Oh, here's a dashing businessman in 1970s garb, and the car is an Opel Commodore, a two-door coupe version, the GS. These were built from 1972 to 1977, and judging by that number plate, I'm guessing this was a fairly period press photo. No details are on the back of the photo, but I'm guessing that's what it was. And again, I've no idea where this was or what the situation was. Two ladies and a 1.1 litre Mark II Ford Escort. Yep, no notes accompany this one sadly. The car dates to late 74 or early 1975, and judging by those trousers, the photo was taken not long after. Staying with classic Fords, we have a Mark I Ford Escort Estate and a camping trip somewhere in England, or somewhere in the UK definitely. But no note to accompany it, but if you recognise that location, please let me know. Oh dear, I bought these a series of negatives quite a while ago. Here are two of them showing a badly smashed Opel Kadett. That's looking very, very second-hand. But of interest also the cars in the background, the Peugeot 504, British Gas Escort van, the Fiat 600, is that a Hillman Avenger as well? Same car, different angle. We've got another gaggle of cars in the background there, real variety of late 60s and 1970s cars. I can see a Maxi in the distance, we've got a Capri, there's a Herald convertible, all sorts of things. There's one of the fin-tail Mercedes as well, a Beetle. Yeah, a bit of everything there. Oh, there's Dad at Tatton Park, and that car is a 1979 Saab Turbo 900 Turbo. That's one of the very first 900 turbos. That was originally sold new in the German market, and Dad bought it when it was about 2 or 3 years old, hence left-hand drive. Great old car that was. I think it still shows as registered, but it was scrapped many years ago. Now we're looking at probably late 60s or the beginning of the 1970s, and this street is in North Wales, in Llandudno. Somewhere between the main Llandudno town centre and West Shore, I believe this is, on one of the roads that link the two. But yeah, quite a variety of cars there, from the likes of Renault, Ford and so on. Thanks to Bob for this one, an Opel Manta, an A-type Opel Manta, on the private registration. That's not its original registration, 292JCG. Interestingly, that registration is still around, and it's now on the 2017 Renault of all things, but back in the 1970s it graced this great little Opel. Now, there are Keith's old photos here. We've got a late 60s Porsche 912 seen here in the 1970s with several early 70s cars visible in the background. There's that white car on Allegro, looks a bit like one from here. Those Steve's photos, and this was probably late 60s, early 1970s, and we've got a 1965 Cortina Mark 1, a 4-door, and a very similar car parked alongside it. This was at RAF St Morgan. If you've seen some of the other videos on the channel, you'll remember the photos of them swapping an engine in a Ford 100E. That was in the same place. Okay, a press photo now of a Coventry registered Triumph 1500, the front wheel drive car that later went on to become the Triumph Dolomite. Ooh, look at this now. This is sort of almost mod sport era, this particular Ford Capri Mark 1. But does anyone recognise that lorry that the Capri is on the back of? I'm not quite sure if I recognise that. It's got a very flat front, so could it be maybe an Albion Claymore or something like that? I'd be interested to know. Look at the Hot Car magazine sticker on the side as well. Now, here's another location that sadly I don't know where it is, but very, very 1970s. We've got an Avenger estate in the foreground. There's an XJ Series 1 in the background on the left there. We've got a Vauxhall Viva, one of the HB Series Vivas, an 1100, and something else behind that, but so 1970s. And look at this, another of Steve's great old photos here. We've got a Bedford CF on an M plate, a drop side pickup, and behind that, a slightly dirty Austin Allegro. So yeah, great scenes in the 1970s. Now, I think this car probably dates some way before the 1970s. I'm guessing this is early 60s, but it was photographed several years later, judging by the notes on the back of it. And this is a Wartburg 311. What an interesting car that is. So definitely worth having a look at some photos of those on Google Images, because they're quite unusual looking cars. Now, there's Sam's photos here from one of his continental trips. Somewhere in Italy we are now. There's a Fiat 124 saloon on the left, which of course was built under license as the Lada in Russia. This is the original Fiat version, and we've got a gorgeous Alfa behind that, VW on the right hand side, and an unidentified coach. Thanks to Melvin for this great pair of photos, XDD 521S and Morris Marina estate. Very, very unusual car. Now, you hardly ever see these anywhere, and there's a Renault 5 next to it in one of the photos as well. This one shows up still on DVLA, but untaxed since 1993. This is a 1978 car. And of similar age is this XAF 374T, a Ford Cortina Mark IV, complete with earlier AA badge on the grille. Here's an interesting shot of a left-hand drive DAF. Judging by the badge on the front, this is a 44, and yeah, these were built from 66 through to 1974. With an 844cc flat twin engine. Maybe you've got any memories of these particular cars. Again, always great to read your comments. Now we have an N-registered Simca. This, I think, is a Simca 1100 estate, or brake, as they would say on the home market. But it's even got a tow bar as well, but I doubt it would have towed anything too large. So maybe a little box trailer or something like that, but probably not a big caravan. Thanks to Steve for this. I think this is one of his colleagues or friends. Vauxhalls here, a little Chevette 4-door saloon on a V plate. That's quite a late example actually of the Chevette. I think that's probably late 79, 1980, somewhere around there, and a much older Anglia 105E parked alongside it. Looks like someone's been masking the windows. Thanks to Barney now, I think we're in Australia for this particular photo. And of 1970s interest is that really nice Peugeot 504. I do like the shape of those a lot. And there's a standard companion up front as well. I used to have one of those, a little estate car version of the standard 10. Yeah, what a great scene that is. And we're back to Roots Group now, GLR 539N, another Humber Scepter, the upmarket version of the Minx and the Hillman Hunter. Staying with Roots Group and Chrysler and so on, we have GCU 627N. the Chrysler 180. These were introduced in 1970 and built until 75. Initially they were built in France, although production did also start up in Spain a little time later. This one shows us no longer registered. That's a South Shields registration. There's a side view of the same car with dog and bowl of water. But more than that, I don't know, but you hardly ever see these cars around now. I don't quite know how well they actually sold back in the day. Probably not a great seller here in the UK at least, but whether they sold well on the continent, I'm not quite sure. These are a bit of an ugly duckling, if I say, in my humble opinion. WOB VM33. This is the VW411. I think it's a 411L. I think for 1968 they had those one-piece single horizontal headlamps either side, but no look, this was the VW Type 4. I never really liked the look of those. Anyway, side-on view now of much more familiar territory. This is a Mark III Ford Cortina 4-door saloon in a very fetching pale shade of metallic blue. Looks like we're on a coastal location somewhere, judging by all those little boats in the background. But yeah, that looks super clean, so I'm guessing it was fairly new at the time of this particular photo. Now, this is a Ford Falcon Futura Sports Coupe. This is a third generation car. Apparently these were introduced in 1966 and built until 1970. But yeah, there's lots of different influences there. The front looks a bit Mark II Cortina, the side looks a bit Ford Mustang. Very rare indeed. Now, WDW981L, this is one of the facelifted Rover P6s, in this case a 3500 3.5 litre Rover V8 engine. Sticking with these cars in the 1970s, we've got this, a slightly earlier probably Skoda. It's either an S100 or a 110, the rear engine Skoda. Of course, these were super popular in rallying back in the day. And of course Skoda is now part of the VW Audi group, but back in those days it was an independent manufacturer in Czechoslovakia. Now, Steve sent over this photo a little while ago. What a great scene that is from the early 1970s. We've got an Austin 1100 here getting a gearbox change. Just typical of your roadside repairs, and there's an Audi alongside, and you can just see on the left another one of those Humber Scepters based on the Minx and Hunter. What a great scene that is. Okay, we're back to Cavalier Mark 1s here. We've got a V-registered example with a lady posed alongside it. I think this was a replacement for the metallic green Cavalier that we saw earlier in this particular collection. I've got a feeling it's the same owners in both cases. This is one of Sam's Continental photographs now. I'm not quite sure where we are with this one. I think it's somewhere in France, yes, judging by the signs on the sign there. Boulangerie and Patisserie. So we've got a Peugeot 404, a little Fiat or a Seat 600 behind that. And yeah, a variety of cars going into the distance. Okay, back to New Zealand. Thanks to Peter Ward for this and several photographs that have been in this particular upload. We've got a Triumph 2500. And this was photographed not far from the Horopito Motors scrapyard, a very famous scrapyard in New Zealand, which is the subject of a separate video elsewhere here on the Old Classic Car channel. Side-on view now of the Lancia Fulvia. This is the 1600 HF Rally. These were built, the Fulvias were built from 63 through to 1976. I'm not quite sure of the date of this particular car, but either way, it's a sharp-looking machine, and I'm very pleased to include it here. Staying on the Lancia Fulvia theme, here we have the Lancia Fulvia Zagato Sport, special bodied car done by Zagato. These particular ones, the Series 1 cars, were built I think from 1965 to 69, and 69 or 70 is about when this photo was taken. The later cars were slightly different. This has got the wing mirrors, later cars were on the door. Okay, we have a Mini 1275 GT now, and for some reason it has a smashed rear window. I wonder what the story with that is. How did it end up with that broken rear window? Just a few more photos from the 1970s now. We've got an S-plate, so about 1977 Triumph Stag with hardtop. You don't often see period photographs of Stags with the hardtops in place, so I was really pleased to come across this one recently. Whereas for the location, I'm not quite sure where this one is, somewhere in the UK by the look of it. Thanks to Sam for this shot as well from the late 1960s of his 1967-ish MGB GT. What a sharp looking car that is. I do like the colour of that one. So yeah, this photo, yeah, it's late 60s, maybe 1970s, somewhere around about there. But yeah, great scene and a lovely car. Tony sent over several photographs taken in and around Stockport in the 1970s, and I grew up about 6 miles from Stockport, so I remember this location very, very well. We've got a Leyland Princess over there on the left, Fiat on the right, and a couple of Fords, an Escort and a Capri with vinyl roof, so a bit of variety there. And what do we have here? I think this belonged to one of Steve's friends or acquaintances, and it's another example of the Arrow series Hillman. Now it could be a Minx or a Hunter, I'm guessing it's probably a Hunter. It's on an L plate, so 1972-3, somewhere around about there. Looks like it's getting a bit of a wash down. Yeah, great to see all these old photographs, I love them. And here's a dapper chap just loading or unloading the rear of his Datsun 120Y Coupe. Look at those very distinctive wheel trims on those. I always remember those on these little 120Ys. Used to be everywhere at one time, but now not so much. Another of Tony's photos, and we've got 2 for the price of 1 in this particular shot. Both Leyland products, of course, at the time. We've got an R-Plate Rover SD1, and behind that a Mark IV Triumph Spitfire. That one is on an N registration. Another photo that I picked up recently, and we've got a 4-door Vauxhall Viva HC from the early 1970s towing an ABI Monza caravan. My first caravanning memories were with a caravan very similar to that, a Mustang, which was also made in the 1970s. That was Mum and Dad's first caravan, very similar to that Monza. Another one of Barry's great old photos here, and we've got another Arrow series car dating to late 74. Thanks to Steve for this one. He sent this one over a little while ago for inclusion in one of these photo videos. We've got a P-Reg Rover P6 V8, again the 3,500 litre engine, very, very sharp indeed. Brown in colour, this one. I think that's his dad, photographed with the Rover there. Got an old press photo now. I've got quite a few old press photographs on file here, and this is one of them. This is the NSU Type 110, later called the NSU 1200, a little air-cooled engine car. 4-cylinder, these particular ones. This is a left-hand drive example, bigger brother to the NSU Prinz. Several photos also turned up lately of this Vauxhall Chevette, a 4-door Vauxhall Chevette from the late 1970s. So I thought I'd include one of them here, a beaming owner behind the wheel of his prized Vauxhall. Another of Keith's great old photographs here from probably the late 1970s, I would have thought, maybe the beginning of the 1980s. We've got a P-Reg Triumph Dolomite Sprint, another variety of cars in the background there. You can see all sorts, little Fiat 127, is that a DAF and an Allegro, and is that a Mark II Cortina as well. And rounding out this collection of cars in the 1970s, we have an M-Reg Citroen GS with a family posed alongside it. And that photo rounds out this collection of photographs featuring cars in the 1970s. Thank you so much for watching this upload. There are many, many uploads all on different subjects across the channel now, so please have a look around before you disappear, and there'll be many, many more videos along before too long, so bye for now.